back, Wheatley, and welcome to episode 175 of the Weekly podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you're doing so. A big thank you to Jamie, who came on last week. We spoke about peatland and the bogs and sustainability, and we talked about so much, actually. We went into wildlife, we went into climate change, all that stuff. Jamie was, my father, if you are listening, Jamie, my father's put you into the top 3 episodes. And my mother thought you were brilliant as well, but they're the main critics of this of this podcast. So yeah, you did well. So thanks very much for that, Jamie. You can support us on Buy Me a Coffee if you like, links in the description, all that. Let's get into this week's episode. Our guest this week is an art critic and the author of the memoir Negative Space, Cristin Leach. How are you doing, Cristin?
I'm doing well, Derek.
Do you know what I had to do, right? People who listen to this podcast a little bit will know that I have some sort of panic sets in when I see fada in a name.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right? Okay. So
did you have to look me up?
Well, this is what happened. I was getting a bit, I think I said it to someone, I can't remember, but I was getting a bit cocky about it. And then this morning I was like, I might just check it because it's kind of rude how do you pronounce your name? So I went into something on YouTube and I saw someone interviewing you and they pronounced your name and I was like,
Christine. I never mind people asking me, honestly, and people get it wrong all the time.
Yeah.
So I've developed and actually that's an interesting thing about my name, because since I was a child, I've had to correct people, and that really teaches you something from when you're, there are times when you just don't correct people, you just let them get it wrong. And then there are other times when you do, and you have to deal with somebody's response, because sometimes people are slightly insulted or offended that you've corrected them, even though it's your name.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of a strange one to navigate. But I mean, I don't mind. It doesn't upset me. I try to correct people if I'm going to have a big chat with them. If it's somebody I've just, picking up an order from a shop from, I wouldn't bother.
Yeah. I think my mom has the same problem because she's ITA, but everybody calls her Ita.
Of course,
so she does have the same problem, and I think she'd probably do the same as you, Cristin, of the sense of, if it's a connection between herself and someone else, then she'll correct it, but it's not really, otherwise it's not really that important. We always start in the same place, Cristin, and if you don't mind, could you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Okay, so I knew you were going to ask me this, and this is a hard one for me, because when somebody says to me, "Where are you from?" I usually say, "Do you want the long or the short answer?" So
that's entirely up to you.
I'll try and give you the short, long answer.
Okay.
So we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I'm the oldest of 4. So there's 14 years between me and my youngest brother. So there's 4 of us with a 14-year gap. My dad worked for IBM his whole career, and he was a customer service engineer. And because of that, the job of the customer service engineer is to serve a geographical patch. So because of that, we moved with his job. So by the time I was 6, I'd actually been to 3 primary schools, and I'd lived in Waterford, Dublin, and Kilkenny. I'd lived in Waterford, Dublin, Kilkenny, and Cork by that stage. And then we stayed in Kilkenny for almost 10 years in a place just outside Castlecomer, which was really idyllic. I had this very idyllic upbringing there. And then when I was a teenager, we moved to Cork City, well, just into the suburbs, and I stayed here and did my leaving cert here. I moved in the middle of 3rd year. So again, 2 secondary schools then, as well as 3 primary schools. And then I stayed and I went to UCC. I started my radio career in UCC. I joined the radio station there, which was a student radio station, and that really set me on a path towards journalism. I think I was studying English and French. And I applied to do a master's in DCU, which was a master's in journalism. So I moved to Dublin when I was 21. I did that master's. I got my first job reading the news on East Coast Radio in Bray, in County Wicklow, reading the hourly bulletins of the local news. And then I got a job in RTE. And I stayed in Dublin. I got married. Both my kids were born in Dublin. And then I moved up the Galtee Mountains, and I stayed there for about 10 years. And then I'm living in Cork City now. I got divorced, separated and divorced, and I moved back to Cork City, really to be close to my family, because by that stage I had 2 kids and they're teenagers now. I wanted to be near schools and things like that. So I feel like I've had a very peripatetic, I like that word, upbringing. And also it's fed into my ideas about home. What's home? Is home a fluid or flexible thing? I used to envy people who could say, when someone says, "Where are you from?" they'd say, "Oh, I'm from here." One answer. My people are from here. And I think when Irish people ask you that, they kind of mean like, who are your people? And where's your land? That's the kind of thing that they mean. So I feel like I'm not really connected to anywhere, but My short answer is always, I live in Cork now. That's what I say when people want the
Yeah,
short answer.
I think what's funny about that, the way you described it was that you didn't, because I obviously asked this question to everyone, and they usually would say, "So I'm from wherever, Dublin," and you
Yeah,
didn't, and you named the few places. I thought that was quite interesting, and then you to round it up with the idea of, that idea. I think that's a very interesting one of like the flexibility of home, like, and
yeah,
where you would consider, obviously consider now where you are. And I suppose with kids as well, and like being in schools and stuff, it adds something else to it. Like maybe it adds a bit more weight to
mm.
it. But it is interesting that you didn't immediately say, "I'm from this place."
I can't say that. I don't
Right.
feel like I'm from any one place.
Yeah.
I honestly don't. I would often say I grew up in Kilkenny because
Right.
that was very formative. In those years, like I was there from when I was 6 till I was about 15, and those are really formative
Hmm.
years. And it was a rural upbringing. We lived near a river, and I was the type of kid who like took a book up into a tree and stayed there in the tree reading my book. So, and we did a lot of just wandering around in the woods. There was great freedom in the 80s. And so I would often say I grew up in Kilkenny, but then my teenage years were in Cork, and that was really formative too. And my 20s were in Dublin.
Yeah.
And my 30s were up the mountain, and my 40s seem to be well,
God.
I'm moving around a good bit, but I'm in Cork now. So yeah.
Excellent. So the other question, and obviously this is another one I ask everybody. When did you first become aware of mental health?
This is another interesting question because it's not a phrase that was used when I was younger, obviously, and I know people that say that to you when you ask them that question. Um, and so I'm a very literal person. So, so when you say, when did you become aware of mental health? I want to give you a very literal answer.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've been trying to figure out how to answer this. Um, I, I, I suppose one of maybe I'll start closer to now. Like
Mm.
one of the impetuses for writing my book was that when my marriage ended, I was hit by waves of anxiety. And and what I think were panic attacks. Now, this is not professionally diagnosed, but that all of the symptoms of having a panic attack. And it reminded me of how I'd felt when I was small.
Mm.
And I didn't know what those things were, but they were to do with anxiety about writing, I think to do with performance, doing well, about being
Yeah.
a good girl, achieving. And it was the same feeling in my body. So I had this sort of, and it's a thread that runs through my book, obviously, this anxiety around writing, but also about maybe trying to put language on things or trying to express something. And then also the idea of things that are unsaid being important and
Mhm.
maybe festering there and causing a problem. So that's one answer. And then another answer, I suppose, is when I was in my early 20s, I was living in Rathmines in Dublin, and a friend of ours died in a car crash. Well, he was hit by a car. And um, that was a really difficult time. And I remember one of my close friends was going through a difficult time. And I don't know why I did this, and I don't know where I got the idea from, but I actually went and looked for a number for a therapist for her, and I found the number and I gave it to her. And I actually gave it to her while she was standing beside a telephone. We didn't have mobile phones,
Yeah.
and she was standing beside a landline. And I said, I really think you should ring this number. And I just handed it to her, and I left the room and closed the door. And she did ring the number, and she went to see the therapist. And I didn't even know if she would, and I'm not even sure why, and I didn't even know if it would be a good fit, or I
Mm.
didn't even have any ideas about what therapy could or couldn't do. But I saw my friend was in pain and she wasn't okay. And I think the feeling was she's not okay and I don't have the tools to help her.
Yeah.
So in a way, maybe that was the start of it. But even then, I wouldn't have used the term mental health. I just
Yeah.
felt my friend needed help and I didn't know how to help her. Um, and that's what I did. So, yeah, that's part of my relationship with mental health is
Yeah.
that idea that they're to ask for help, to find somebody who can help. Um, but again, I think, Irish people often don't talk easily about things. And I was feeling anxious about this podcast and I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out why. And I think it's
Yeah.
because I knew you were going to ask me about mental health and it's really hard to talk
Yeah.
about.
I think
Yeah.
it. I think you're not the only one, and I noticed. I was just talking to Jamie last week, and he had never spoken about his mental health, to anyone, like bar a couple of people, close friends or family, and you know, when I heard him talking about it, I was kind of thinking, I knew he hadn't spoken it before. And I was anxious for him because I could kind of feel that anxiety from it. And look, it's a fairly common way to feel, but it's also now you'd like to think that people wouldn't be feeling like that anymore, would it? You know, that they could be, because it is more in the lexicon, and you know, even what you're saying about, you gave that to your friend, the idea of like a therapist, wouldn't have been talked about back, you know, 20 years ago.
This was the late 90s.
Yeah,
So I don't even know where I got that idea.
yeah,
I don't know why I did that. But you know, years later she told me it had helped her and she said thank you, you know, and I think when my marriage was ending, I knew when I needed help. You
hmm
know, I've spoken to therapists, and I think maybe it's just that thing of knowing to ask for help. And one of the things about going to a therapist is you go into the room and you don't know what to say.
yeah,
you know,
that's true.
you know, and then you think, oh, but there's so much. Where would I begin?
Mm,
You know, because
yeah,
if you're there, it's because you do need somebody to
for
listen
sure,
to, you know.
for sure.
So you know, I've learned a lot about myself from doing that. And it was years later, like, you know,
Mm,
25 years later, whatever, when I ended up going to a therapist. But yeah, I think what you're saying about it being common and it should be more easy to talk about mental health.
mm,
Um, it is easier to talk about mental health because I think the judgment has
yeah,
dissipated. You know, there's a lot more empathy out there. There's a much broader understanding that we all have times in our lives when, you know, things go a bit off. You know, we
for
don't feel
sure.
right. You
Yeah.
know, and it's on a scale, it's on a spectrum. You can go right to a place where you're having a really hard time and you're really not okay, and then there's times when, you know, you're just, you know, you just need a bit of help. You know, so I don't think anybody escapes that actually in
Mm,
their lives. I really
yeah,
don't.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
And so
think,
I think there's a better understanding of the fact that this is just very normal. This is
yeah,
being a human in the world, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
It is, and it's that whole thing of like we all have mental health. It just can be good mental health at times. It can be bad mental health at times, and knowing when to, you know, seek help if we need it. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
why did you? Why did you talked about journalism and stuff? But what made you want to become an art critic?
Ooh, I so again, these are hard questions. Okay,
Sorry.
so it's like I suppose like the simple answer is I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing when I'm
Mhm.
doing it. Right. So
Okay. Yeah.
I so when I'm doing that, I feel like I'm in the right place. You know,
Yeah. Of course.
it makes sense to me and I enjoy it. And it's also a weird one because there are no jobs in art criticism in Ireland. It's not really a profession. I've
Yeah.
been freelance the whole time I've worked as an art critic. It's been freelance. So it's precarious and there's no job progression, there's no pensions, there's no, you don't get a weekly salary to do it. Um, so in a way, it's like a awkward, problematic choice. You know, it's not an
Yeah.
easy one. But my mum is an artist, so I
Yeah.
suppose that's another thing. I was brought up, and my siblings too, going into galleries as a very normal part of life. And I realized when I started writing about art in mainstream media for newspapers and doing radio work as well, that an awful lot of people feel excluded from galleries. They don't think
Mhm.
it's a place for them. They have possibly anxiety about crossing the threshold. Like, am I
Yeah.
allowed in this door? Is this space for me? Are people going to look at me? You know, is someone going to go, what are you doing here? You know, so a lot of my motivation in doing my work as an art critic and choosing also to not write in specialist publications, if at all possible, to write in mainstream publications, newspapers, to be on the radio, to do TV work if I can, is to talk to a general audience that isn't necessarily an art world audience,
hmm
you know, and to try and open the doors. Like all of my work around being a critic was to try and demystify the language around it, not to use that art speak, to tell a story. So to bring the journalism skills to bear so that I'm telling you a story. And even if you never see this show and never encounter this artist's work, if you've read the thing that I've written, something might have opened up inside you to feel that, you know, you too could have a connection with an artwork, even if it's not this art or this particular, you know. So it's kind of like this idea of the art critic as a conduit between
hmm
art and audience. But it was always for me about opening it up as opposed to closing it down. I don't like the idea of this being an exclusive world only certain people can
Yeah.
be in, you know. So that really, and also I guess because I was brought into galleries from when I was tiny, and my mum said I've been going to exhibitions since I was in the womb. That's what she said. So I feel at home. Every time I walk into a gallery, I feel at home. I'm
That's
just really happy.
yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the ideal, for someone who loves it. And like, I wonder, because when you seek kind of critics' voices on something, whether it's a piece of art or an exhibition, or like, if people are into films or they're into music, I
Yeah.
think it's very important. I found it very important growing up to. I've always been into music since I was quite young, and I often will listen to an album and kind of go, "Well, this is what I think of the album." But I do want another perspective, And if I don't have like a friends around who listen to the same band or artist, whatever it might be, I will seek out from people I guess I trust within that industry. And I
Yeah.
think the way you're describing it as someone who wants to invite people into the world, rather than for it to be, a kind of snobbish and, only people who are wearing, dinner jackets can come in here.
Yeah.
I think that's so important to someone who maybe doesn't understand what they're looking at, but can still appreciate.
Like my thing about art is it's something made by a human for other
Hmm.
humans, right? That's what it is,
That's
right?
it.
And so is music, and so is, so if you're a human, this was made by a human for other humans.
Mm,
So it is for you, right? You don't have to like it. It mightn't be
yeah.
to your taste. You might think it's bad or it doesn't execute itself well or whatever it is. But it is for you, because so that's one thing I think. And also the idea of being wrong. So actually a lot of anxiety comes from the idea of being wrong. What if I'm
Mm,
wrong? So what if I have the wrong opinion about this, right?
yeah.
What if I don't get it and then people think I'm stupid, right? Like
Yeah.
this is one of the things that happens, right? And the idea that, art is something that you can only get if you already know something. I don't. Okay, look, you can get more the more you learn,
Hmm.
right? But as you said, the critic is should be part of opening a conversation. I think it's a conversation. I see it
Yeah.
as a conversation, right? And I really do feel that human beings have instinctive responses to things like color and form and shape, and this is true. It's been proven. So if you are in a room full of blue paintings, you're going to feel a certain way,
Yeah.
right? You just are. And there's nothing wrong with how you feel. Whatever way you feel is how you feel, but you are going to feel something, So, and it's the same. I guess one of the things that I've also been trying to do in my career is to open up that idea that we need to get more kids into galleries because kids
Hmm.
are amazing in their responses. They don't censor themselves.
Yeah.
They just go, like that makes me feel angry or that makes me feel happy or, and to start with feelings as well. Like, so maybe to not start with the logical brain bit, just to
Mm.
start with feelings. How does this feel? Because I think we do that with music. Like, how do I
Yeah.
feel? How do I feel when I hear this music, right? And we don't censor ourselves. And I do think as well that in Ireland, throughout school, from when you're very, very small, you're taught how to read a piece of text and analyze it, pull it
Mm.
apart, understand it, comprehension, right? And we do that with poetry and we do it with plays right through to the Leaving Cert. Um, and we don't do it with visual culture.
Mm.
Like we don't sit down and in the same way that we do with text, we don't get kids to analyze unless you're doing art for your leaving cert, say, in
Yeah.
which case you might do. But as a general skill set, we don't teach children to pull apart, analyze, look at art, visual culture, anything, even advertising. And
Mm.
those are so useful skill sets to be able to say, what is this image saying to me? You know, that's really important. It's as important, I would say, as being able to understand what a piece of text is saying to you, because we live in a visual world. So I'd love to see, interpreting a painting or a picture be, as important as being able to write an essay about a poem. That's
Yeah,
the
but
standard thing.
yeah, and it's like it is the imagination anyway, because like if a piece of abstract art, I'm just using as abstract because this is my limited lack of knowledge in art, but the idea that it can mean a lot of different things to different people, and that's kind of what I get from it, and um
Yeah,
expressionism and stuff like that. They're all kind of things where you can kind of pick things out that maybe only you can see. It's like looking at a cloud and someone can see a dog and then someone else can see the fire engine. It's that
exactly.
idea of but that's as much down to imagination as like taking apart a poem.
Yeah, and it's also about who you are when you see it. So as a critic, like I'm really interested in the moment of encounter. That's where the spark comes from for my writing, right? So it's the moment of encountering the work. Now you could be a critic who wants to write about the moment of conception of the work. You might want to write about what the artist was thinking when they made it, the research they did, or their background, or all that kind of stuff. And I do include some of that in my writing. But the thing that makes me come alive and makes me interested in what is that thing of what happens when one human meets this thing another human made. What happens then, right? And I'm really interested too in the idea of the critic's word not being the final word, like as you
Hmm.
said, not being these people like stroking their chins going, this is a good album, this is a bad album, or whatever, right? So like to be able to have multiple voices, to allow responses to be whatever they are, and also with the idea that if if say I write a negative review of an exhibition, that's not also the end of my relationship with that artist or their work. I
Yeah.
may see their work again in 5 years' time, and not only may the work be different, I might be different. The
Yeah.
world might be different. So everything has changed. And so maybe the moment of encounter is different too, right?
Hmm.
So I'm interested in that being a fluid thing, not a fixed thing. And the idea of things being fixed or not fixed is also a theme that runs through my book as well. And I think when I was writing the book, a lot of these things that have been threads throughout my career pulled to the fore, and I started to understand that they really fed into the way I look at the world. And I suppose the kind of manifesto I'd write for myself if I was writing one as a critic.
Well, what I really enjoyed, I enjoyed a lot of things about the book, obviously, but what I really enjoyed about it was the fact that you did draw your art criticism into your memoir, because obviously it's such a major part of your life. It's something that you love and you do all the time. And it would have been, well, I was going to say it would have been easy to write about just the memoir, but it obviously wouldn't have been. But the fact that you brought in that, work side of it as well, why did you think that was important? Or is it just in the fact that it is such a huge part of your life?
So for me, art isn't separate to life, and
Mm,
writing is also not separate to my life. So a lot of the book came from notes I'd just written to myself or things I'd written on my phone or whatever, and that were never intended to be in a book. I wasn't intending to write a book. Um, but I write things down as a way to explain the world to myself, and as a kind of anchor. I think I've used that
mhm.
metaphor before, like these words help anchor me. So if I was feeling anxious, sort of like the idea that you're almost not connected to the ground anymore, like you're flying off,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not grounded anymore, this isn't okay. So for me to put language on it, to put a sentence on it, to put words on it, pulls me back down. It's
Mm,
like I'm grounded again. And I was just thinking there when we were talking, I said to you, when I go into a gallery, I feel like I'm at home. I feel
mm.
like I'm home. And that is interesting because I had just finished telling you that there isn't anywhere that's home, as in
Yeah,
I've moved around a lot. So,
that that
so interesting. So, anywhere in the world, I can go into a gallery and I'm home. I'm
mm,
home, but I'm also home when I stand in front of a painting. So I don't even have to be in a gallery, anywhere. If I'm
yeah.
in your house and you have a painting and I stand in front of it, so maybe that might say a lot about me and my childhood, having moved around a lot.
It does, but it also says a lot about your love for what you do, like in art in general. It's a beautiful thing to state that, like, you feel at home in a gallery and that's where you're going to, that's where
Yeah.
maybe your next um assignment. That's not the right word, is it?
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. We'll
sure.
go. But you know what was interesting as well, because everybody knows the kind of concept of fight or flight when it comes to maybe anxiety, or at worst, I suppose, panic attacks and stuff. But
Yeah.
what was you said in the book that writing caused you panic,
Right.
and
So this was, yeah.
yeah, but that's what, like, so as soon as I read that, I was like, how did you write the book? It's like, well, that's fight, that's not flight.
Okay. So, there were quite a lot of things going on, and I don't feel panicked anymore about writing. So
Okay.
this is something has changed. There's a So that was really to do with how I felt when I was a kid. And I did describe in the book some incidences when I was a kid, like maybe writing an essay for a competition or something like that, where
Hmm.
I really felt panic, like panic in my body, sweating, all that stuff. And maybe it's a fear of getting it wrong. I think some of it for me was a fear of being exposed in a way, like showing my most important thing. Because when I think back to being a child, home for me was reading and books.
Mm-hmm.
So reading and books was home. So words were home. And so, like I say to you now, going to a gallery, I feel at home. And I read less than I used to. When I was a kid, I just devoured books. I just read. So, language was home. So I think maybe if I could make words, I had this idea of books being really magical and authors being incredible people who did this amazing magic with words, made whole worlds. And I guess maybe one of my ambitions is to be able to do that, even though I wouldn't have admitted it to myself maybe even back then. But so the panic was to do with that. And when I first started writing art criticism as journalism, there was a time when I would just be overwhelmed by the task, because it's actually quite a weird thing to do, to put words on something that doesn't have words, and and to take something that is a picture, turn it into language, and then hope that when someone reads that language, they also get a picture in their head then. It's a very interesting act of translation. So there was that too, but something has changed. And when I wrote the book, I know I did an interview with Tanya Sweeney in The Independent when it came out, and when I met her, she said, I felt like you wrote it in a fever dream, like it was written in a fever dream, because it has a propulsion. Like it's like, I hesitate to say it's a page turner, but I know a lot of people read it very fast when they read it. Yeah,
I did.
So, did you?
I
Okay.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So I know a lot of people who read it in one go when they read it.
Well, I think it's this is just obviously my, experience of reading it. And I thought that, like, because you like, it's obviously a memoir, there's art criticism. There's what I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like a sense of almost like a release on your part, because it's very difficult to write, I would imagine. I was never married, by the way, but to write about something as personal as a marriage breakup.
Yeah. And also, I'm quite a private person. Like, people who follow me on social media would know I'm only posting work things, really. I don't talk about my personal life at all. So that was an odd thing to do. It might tie back to the thing that you were saying there about me interweaving the art criticism. It wasn't necessarily a choice to interweave the art criticism as much as this is this is this is so this is what was going on in my life, was that I was writing, but also the panic about writing and identity, and my identity as a writer, my identity as a person was shattered when my marriage ended. It's like, who am I? How did this happen? Well, everything I thought was real is not real anymore, or the things I thought were fixed, to use that word fixed, are not fixed. The things that I thought were maybe, I think people get married, they think they'll be married forever. You get married thinking this is it, this is who I'll be with. We'll be buried together under the same headstone. That's the idea you have, I guess, when you get married. And then for that to suddenly not be the future is really like it's completely, it throws you completely. And it's not just the practical things of, oh my God, what will I do now? How will we practically undo this thing, which is a marriage with children and a house and all of these things? It's also, who am I? Who am I? So writing the memoir was also about saying to myself, I'm a writer. That's actually who I am. I'm a writer. And it was reclaiming that for myself. I am a writer. And a very strange thing happened, which was the way that I write now has just become, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like I know what I'm doing. If that sounds ridiculous after 2.5 decades of doing this. I mean, I always knew what I was doing, I suppose, but I feel now like I sit down and I go to work, and it's like, I actually described this to my therapist not so long ago as wrestling a snake. So when you're trying to tell a story in words and it's a complicated story, it literally feels to me like wrestling with a snake, a snake into a shape. Right? So the snake has muscle and form, and it's trying to do its own thing. But if you can kind of maybe charm it or something, and also use your own ambition around it, that was like, physically, that's how it felt to me, like writing a story, because I edit and edit and edit as I'm going, and I'm also crafting all the time when I'm writing. So I do this thing which I think of as combing through the text, and I'm always looking for the cadence in the sentences, and I'm thinking about how it would sound if you said it out loud, and I've always written like that. And so to me, it's like I'm wrestling this snake, and then I'm going to get this snake into this really nice shape. Maybe it's more like a Book of Kells type of thing, like with all the knots and whatever, and then it's gorgeous. it's the right shape, right?
But but then going back then, like you said, it's a long time since you started writing.
Mm.
You didn't feel um as comfortable. Was it like, was there a sense of like imposter syndrome there? Or was it, what was it that you felt before it that you didn't feel as comfortable writing?
It wasn't imposter syndrome. Um, no, it wasn't imposter syndrome because I did feel like I was doing what I was meant to be
Yeah.
doing. So that wasn't that. Maybe it was my very own strong inner critic
Yeah,
telling me
fair,
it wasn't good enough.
fair. Yeah, yeah,
So not that I'm not in the right place. It was
yeah.
I am in the right place. I know I can do this, but how can I make it brilliant? Because you might have noticed I'm a high achiever. So I was in school, I was a really high achiever. So, I really wanted to be really good at
Yeah,
this. I
yeah.
wanted to be a really good critic. I wanted to be. Um, so I think the anxiety was about thinking I was failing at being good at it.
Okay.
Not that
Yeah,
I shouldn't have been doing it, but
yeah,
how can I be better at it? I
yeah.
don't know. It's quite complicated. It's not very. I don't have a simple answer for that.
No, yeah, I guess not. Like it's, the imposter syndrome thing is kind of thrown out there, and I've experienced that so much, and I still do, even though people keep telling me, you're doing the right thing with whatever you're doing, and it's just there. So I often ask about it on the podcast when people have felt like a certain way about what they were doing. Um, there was something that I related to, and I had spoken about this, funnily enough, about 6 months ago to a friend. I hadn't talked about it on the podcast or anything.
Mm.
And you described, now my experience is slightly different. But you described going to a mountaintop and screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming in your house and things like that. And
Yeah.
I go, I hadn't done it in a while, but I go to like my pillow on my bed and I put my face in the pillow and I'll scream. Now this would be at moments of like obviously heightened anxiety or certain lows that you might be feeling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
At the time, like I'm guessing this wasn't something that you planned. You go, I'm going to go up that mountain and I'm going to scream. Why did you? Was it just a physical release?
Oh gosh, there are layers to this.
Yeah.
So one thing is, after my ex-husband moved out, we've always shared custody of the kids. So
Mhm.
they've moved between our two homes, and they've a very good relationship with their dad. And so I found myself in this house, which had been a family home, quite frequently on my own, without the person who was no longer my husband, and
Yeah.
also without my kids. And this was like a building. We built a house, so we designed and built a house, and it was a building that was built for the four of us to be in. And I found myself in it by myself
Hmm.
quite frequently, and it was up the mountain. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it was so silent. Like anybody who has kids knows, when the kids leave the house and you're on your own in the house, it's like, whew, my God, there's like a vacuum, like, oh, sudden silence, and
Yeah.
even if nobody was making any noise in the house, the
No.
presence of people in the building makes some sort of hum, whatever it is. So it was like a counter to the silence was just to scream. But also it was tied to this thing, and this is also why I wrote the book, I think, this idea that women are meant to shut up and go quiet and not talk about these
Hmm.
problems, and um we did therapy for a while together for a year actually, to see could we fix the marriage, save the marriage, but during that entire time I didn't tell anybody what was going on. So I felt there had been this silencing of me, and it
Hmm.
was really, and I mean, it was a self-silencing. I didn't, I just, I say in the book, I had this idea that if we could save it, then it would have been bad to tell people what had happened, because
Yeah.
people would have opinions then, and you have this thing of like, oh, I don't want people to have opinions. Maybe you go through a bad patch, you sort it out, you carry on,
Yeah.
and then you don't want people going, oh, but didn't your marriage nearly end? It's
Yeah.
nobody's business, right? So there's a way in which you're like, okay, I need to keep this to myself. But then there's another part of it, which is not talking about it is bad for your mental health.
Hmm.
Bad. It was bad for me. It was very bad for me. It made me really anxious. It was one of the hardest times in my life. And so that was bad. And then I had this idea that, in Ireland, we expect families to stick together, keep the family thing in the family, don't talk about it outside the family. We
Hmm.
expect women, I think, to put up with a lot. I think it's a societal thing. And I said in the book, that idea of stick together for the kids, don't talk about it for the kids, all this sort of stuff. And I was thinking, what if we did talk about it for the kids?
Mm-hmm.
What if we did? What if we didn't stay silent? What if, because they too are going to grow up and become adults and encounter adult things in the world,
Yeah.
and relationships don't always last, and even if it doesn't happen to them, it might happen to someone around them, to understand that it's okay for things to break.
Mm-hmm.
Things do break. It's okay to be sad when things break. It's okay to have a hard time when things break. Um, and then you can move through it and come to the side, like that idea of resilience. So there was loads of things in the screaming. It was like, I
Mm.
need to make a noise. I have to talk about this. And I was, and this was what you're describing there, the screaming in the house, the screaming at the mountain. That was in the period of time when I wasn't talking. So I had
Right.
to make a noise.
Yeah.
But the book is me talking again.
Yeah.
I'm talking now. I'm going to tell you this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was just fascinated by that I not so long ago spoken about the idea of, I suppose mine was well, it was probably, like you said, layers. There's probably layers to mine too, but it felt at the time that it was like a physical release of the anxiety. Do you know, it was that kind of
Yeah.
to rid myself of that. Now, whether it works or not, I don't know, but it feels good when you're in the middle of it, like when you're just
Well, it
screaming.
has to be adrenaline, right, as
Yeah,
well. So it
yeah.
has to be that, right? So it's like, and I describe in the book like wringing my hands, and that was literally like, I know like wringing could be like holding your hands and wringing
Hmm.
them, but that was literally shaking, like shaking, shaking,
Right.
shaking with my hands shaking, and it's like adrenaline in the body. And as you said, you've got your fight or flight or fright, and also we have fawn now as a
Mm.
response to trauma or to a dangerous situation where you might actually placate the person who's causing you the trauma, which seems like a counterintuitive thing,
Yeah.
but that's also recognized now. And so the fawn thing is part of the silence.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a noise now. I'm going to be quiet and careful so nothing else gets worse, right?
Yeah.
But if you do that, the adrenaline's still in your body. Like the flight and the fight, that's still in you somewhere. You're not really,
Yeah.
you know, it's body. So screaming, maybe that lets it out, right?
Yeah.
Or like I described in the book, I had a friend who I used to ring, and she'd be like, Christine, you need to drop and do 10 press ups and ring me back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, hang up the phone, 10 press ups, ring her back. How do you feel? So she was saying, get it out of your body,
Yeah.
get it out of your body, right? And the screaming is getting it out of your body, but it's also vocalizing, which I think is a really powerful thing, to make a sound.
Yeah.
Like it's an animal thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Make a sound. Yeah.
I was like,
So,
I was reading about primal scream therapy. That doesn't
yeah.
seem to be. I don't know. I'm sure it's still around, but I got I became aware of it through the fact that John Lennon did it, and I was kind of going,
Mm.
oh, that would be amazing. But I actually went online to try and find someone to talk to about it, like, but even to come on the podcast and talk about it, but it's very hard to get now. So I don't know if it went out of fashion. But at the time, John Lennon seemed to get a lot from it, creatively as
It
well
feels
as
a bit 70s, doesn't it?
it's very 70s. But like, I don't mind a bit of that, but
Me neither.
but actually this ties in, and I didn't mean this. I'm never this good at linking stuff together. This ties in very well. You write songs, but don't sing them in front of people.
Yeah, I
Why
know.
is that?
I'm working on that.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, I've been thinking about sound in my work,
Mhm.
because the sound is a theme, and actually, just speaking of it, like there's a chapter in my book which describes childbirth, some of my experience of childbirth, and the idea of making a noise or not making a noise. And I say that
Mhm.
I sang my daughter out,
Yeah.
like on this note, which was like an opening note, like a sound that would open, and so it's like, it's not just the sound, it's what making the sound does to your body.
Yeah.
The writing the songs, after my marriage ended and my ex-husband moved out, I had to drive quite a lot of places at the time, and I started to listen to a lot more music than I had been listening to in the recent past, and I started singing in the car, like really loud, really, really loud.
Yeah.
It was like, and it would go from like singing "I'm Still Standing" like
Yeah.
Elton John to singing these teary, like crying sort of ballads about
Yeah.
how awful everything was. And so I was singing to myself in the
Yeah.
car, and then I started writing these things which turned into song lyrics, which are in the book. Um, but it's connected to the panic thing. So I can
Right.
sing on my own. I can sing to my kids. I can sometimes sing to my family. I can stand on a stage and talk till the cows come home if you give me a
Mhm.
microphone. But if you stand on me on a stage and you want me to sing, I'm going to start panicking.
Yeah.
But I love to karaoke. So I'll karaoke
Okay.
in a room with nobody,
Right.
like with just friends or whatever, right? So that's
Yeah.
fine. So it's something to do with making noise, not making noise. And I think possibly to do with being afraid of making a mistake. Because when you
Yeah.
sing, if you hit the wrong note, everyone's going to know,
Yeah.
right? And you can't fix it. So when I'm writing, I can go back and fix a sentence, you know, I can craft it or whatever. If you're singing live in the moment and you hit the wrong note, then you've hit the wrong note. That's
Yeah.
what's happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's to do with like becoming comfortable with getting things wrong or that kind of stuff. I'm still working on those songs. I'm going to turn them into songs. They're
Good.
going to become songs.
Yeah. I mean, do you know what's funny about the mistake thing? And this is like I was in a band a long time ago, and I do on my Instagram sometimes I'll sing a song and I'll post it, right? And it's like I don't think I have a great singing voice, but you know I can hold a tune, as they say. Now I listen to Radiohead a lot, and I know Tom York of Radiohead. His voice cracks a lot, but it actually
Yeah.
cracks. It cracks live, but it cracks on the albums as well, and he doesn't fix it. So that little like high pitched squeal almost like that's not supposed to be there, he leaves it in. So I got started thinking like be comfortable in that. Like this is what me that my getting out of my comfort zone now is getting back on the guitar and singing into a phone and like putting it up. And if my voice breaks, well then it breaks, and then like so what? But in saying that, it's easier to do that onto a camera than it is when you're standing on a stage. So
I think it's the public thing, isn't it? The
yeah,
live public thing. But it's the crack in the voice that we love. So
yeah,
that's what makes it human.
yeah,
Like,
that's true.
this is a human singing you something that they're feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want something that sounds perfect. You don't
Mm.
want the thing that's going to get them 100% in their music academy exam, right? You don't really want that. What you want is somebody feeling something so intensely that maybe their voice does crack, you know, or
Yeah.
maybe they miss the breath, or maybe, and actually you've just reminded me, I sang at my sister's wedding not too long
Oh, did
ago.
you?
I did, yeah. And so it's weird because I have stepped up to the plate and sung, if people have asked me to in the past at things, but now this was a very small wedding, only about 30 people there. My sister got married in London, not too long ago. But I sang at my sister's wedding. She asked me to sing The Voyage, the Christy Moore song.
Right.
So I did that, and it was a small group of people, and that was fine. But I actually forgot the words at one point. Just before I think the second verse, I just did a blank, and it was weird because I didn't panic. I just
Yeah.
waited. I just waited a second, and maybe there was like two beats too much, and then the words came to me, and I kept singing. And afterwards, I said to my daughter, "Oh my God, I forgot the words for a second." And she said, "Yeah, I noticed, but I wasn't going to say."
Oh, they'll always
Like,
notice. Yeah, it's what that.
and then my dad said to me, "Yeah," he said, "I was thinking, does anyone know the words? Can they shout them up to her?" Because there was a moment of discomfort, but I
Yeah,
got it before everyone got so uncomfortable that, that they were
you
like, "Oh,
say
help."
you saved the day, but like it
Save the
would be
day.
remiss of me not to ask you what is your go-to karaoke song then?
Oh my God, I've loads.
Oh
I've
dear, I wouldn't.
loads. I've
You're all right then.
loads. I've loads and loads. I don't have one single one.
But that's a
Yeah.
good thing though, because it's not like, look, people will think I can only sing this song well, so this is the one I will always have to do. But if you've got loads, then that's good.
I've loads. And I'll do like 80s pop. I'll do like whatever, all
Yeah,
sorts of
whatever's
stuff.
in
Yeah.
there.
I love a good ballad. I like a song with a story. Love a song with a
Yeah,
story. So that's
I,
that's for me. And I think that's the narrative thing. I want to tell a story when I'm singing. So
I
that's
get
it.
that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
there was something that you said in the book that was kind of stuck with me, and it's like it's from 2021, I should say. So my marriage is broken. I have broken something in myself too, and it is good.
Mhm.
Um,
It was the thing that was holding me back.
right.
That's the
That's
thing
what I
that broke. Yeah.
and
To
that
be
yeah.
brave. Like it's all of those things that people say in a sort of pat way, like, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
Mm,
That's a profound question, actually.
yeah.
What would you do if you weren't afraid? And I was reading a lot about writing and kind of looking at writers on Twitter and things and stuff. And I don't remember who said this, unfortunately, but there was a writer who said, "Write home like you're never coming back."
Mm,
And that phrase made me think, oh wow, okay. If I can tell one story, what's the most important story to tell right now?
yeah.
And there was another one which was, and this has been said before, and I don't know who said it originally, but that you should write the thing you wouldn't want your parents to read.
Yeah,
That's what they
yeah.
say. So that's going to be your best writing. Okay. And I had actually I'd written an essay for an artist called Philip Moss, who's based in Donegal. And he had made a body of work. I'd gone up to visit him as a studio in Donegal, and he'd made a body of work about his childhood, and he had a difficult time in his childhood. And when I talked to him, he said this is work that he'd been waiting to make because he didn't want to upset his mum.
Oh,
And no, I think he's in his 60s, I think. I hope I got that right. And he was thinking, well, I can only make this art if my mum isn't around anymore.
mm,
But as he got older and older, he realized maybe he would be the one who wasn't around, and maybe he would never get to make the art. Maybe his mum would be there longer than him, you
yeah,
know? And so he was talking about that, and he said he realized if you've got something you need to do and something you need to make, you got to do it now,
yeah,
you know? But the counter to that is there's a right time. I
yeah.
couldn't have written this book at any other time in my life. Well, for obvious reasons, because the events in it hadn't happened, but also I wasn't this person at
Hmm.
any other time in my life. And when the book was commissioned, it was actually commissioned as a book of 8 essays, and it became a memoir because the 8 essays, and it is in 8 chapters, which you could read as 8 essays if you want to, but it became a memoir because when the 8 essays were laid out, it read like a book,
Yeah.
you could read it in that way. But I also, just speaking of songs and music and everything, I thought of it as an album of 8 songs.
Oh,
That's what
really?
I was thinking about. Yeah, because like the thing that happens in the book is that I get a text message to say that my husband has been cheating on me, right? And this sort of moment in the book is like to me, it's like a drum being hit. It's like
Hmm.
bang, right? And that is a beat that repeats at stages throughout the book as a kind of like bang, this happened,
Mm.
you know? And I thought of it like a rhythm in the book. And I was thinking of like when I was writing, I was like, I'm telling the same story over and over here. This is the same story, just told 8 times in 8 different ways, right? And I thought, what format allows you to do that? Well, actually, an album of 8 songs
Mm.
lets you tell the same story in all of those 8 songs, but slightly differently from a slightly different angle, you know? So I was thinking about that, and maybe that was sort of, and also the idea that women have permission to, sing about heartache.
Yeah,
Women have permission to
yeah,
be, songstresses who write, like from Dolly Parton to, Taylor Swift. Like you can sing about your relationship breakups. You're
yeah.
allowed to do that, right? That's like a space in which women are allowed to have this voice, you know? So maybe part of that tradition or idea. Yeah, of
Maybe if you don't mind, can I read out a piece that you wrote
course.
in the book? And it's I have a photo of it. I just thought it was an amazing piece of writing. So you were at a exhibition of William McKeown's a tribute show. So what you said was sometimes art can make you want to disappear, not in a bad way. Sometimes standing in front of a painting can remind you so overwhelmingly of the way in which we are all part of a bigger whole that it seems to offer the possibility of a kind of painless exploration, an embrace that might simply absorb you into obliteration, but into everything. It is rare, but sometimes art can remind you of your own insignificance without making you feel at all small. William McKeown's art did that.
Mm.
So the reason I loved it so much was because immediately it made me want to go and look at William McKeown's work.
Did you go and have a look?
I did, and that's the thing. I suppose going back to what we started at, the beginning, wouldn't have known of William McKeown, and
Yeah.
when you wrote about it, and that's like my favorite. I've said it on here a number of times. My favorite painting is the Scream. I just because I know
Mm.
the story behind it of the anxiety on the pier and all that, and it kind of appealed to me in that way. But I just like it. Um, that's the way it's painted as well. That it's not this perfection of a face. It's everything is like a swirl.
Mm.
And when you wrote about that, like it just reminded me of how I feel when I'm looking at it, but you just wrote it in a better way than I'd be able to,
Great.
in that sense, like, and I just thought that like that sums up perfectly what it is to stand in front of something that is that beautiful or meaningful to you.
Yeah. And that's why people cry in front of Rothkos,
Hmm.
like people cry in front of paintings. And William McKeown makes these what look like abstract, but they could be pictures of sky, pieces of
Hmm.
sky, like have this beautiful graduation. And he's made these like uplifting hope paintings, they're called, but then also these other paintings that are black
Mm.
paintings, dark black paintings, and also beautiful little drawings of wildflowers. Um, and so for me in his work, there's those extremes of mental health from pure joy and that feeling which you get when you're a kid and you lie down in the grass and it's just like buzzing around, and you're looking at a daisy, and there's nothing else there,
Yeah.
that's got all your attention. And then this utter darkness that we can feel sometimes, and that idea that you could disappear into a painting is definitely something that has stuck with me, or disappear into an artwork.
Mm.
And it happens with sound, though. If you go to a really, like, listen to a really good piece of sound art, or go to a very immersive installation, it's like you disappear in there. You
Yeah.
become one with it. And that's a remarkable thing when an artist can do that for you. And again, it's like it makes you feel totally connected, but also almost like you've sort of vaporized. It's
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting, isn't it?
It is, and I find it can happen in films as well. Like you get so
Mm.
absorbed in the film, the story, and everything about it, that when the credits start rolling, you're in a daze, and you're kind of thinking like, "Oh, I never thought of what I was going to do when that ended."
Yeah.
It feels so bizarre, like that feeling of something that's can draw you so in, and that's like art in every sense is like that, and I feel kind of bad for the people who maybe haven't been down those routes yet with regards to music or art or whatever you may be into. um so speaking of that, see, I've done another link now. I'm on a roll. So Christine, when you weren't like, again, this question is probably redundant for you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you like to do in your spare time?
I have a curious hobby that is
Okay.
not really a hobby, but no, I do yoga, and I trained as a yoga
Yeah.
teacher and all those kind of things. But like, that's the thing I do. And I love to walking. I love walking. But it's like when I was a kid, what I loved to do was rearrange my books on the shelves, right? I
Yes.
do less of that now, but the thing that makes me utterly happy, like totally in my zone, really delighted with myself, um, nowadays, is
Okay.
moving the art on the walls in my house around. So I could just get entirely lost in rehanging things on the wall, moving everything around. And it's the thing that kind of I'm just delighted with myself when I'm doing that. And
Okay.
I have a friend who's like, "How can you keep moving things? Aren't you always like hammering nails?" And I have a drill, and I'm putting in the roll plugs and everything. And my walls are full of like redundant nails and screws hanging in places where you can't use them anymore because I've moved a big picture or I have two small ones or
Mm.
whatever. But moving the art around makes me so happy. It's like putting on an exhibition, and people come into the house and they're like, "Oh, is this a new thing?" And I'm like, "No, that's not new. I just moved it," because you see it again. You see it new because it's hanging
Yeah.
somewhere new. So that makes me happy.
But it all that's a,
Ask me, what do you want to do in your spare time? Just move things around. But I mean, once it's done, it's done. Like, it takes however long. I might do it for an hour and then it's done, and I won't do it again for months. But yeah.
but I like it because it is not, is it also a sense of like the house is changing too,
Yeah, yeah. And
which is
maybe that's
nice.
tied to my notion of not wanting things to be fixed, because I'm a
Mm.
terrible one for moving the furniture too. I move the furniture around. So I'm not like, "Oh, the sofa belongs there. That's where the
Yeah.
sofa is," right? No, I'm like, "Oh no, what if the sofa was over here?" So I move often enormous pieces of furniture by myself, wardrobes and all sorts of things. And my mum used to do that when I was small as well. I like moving things around. I like arranging my space. I think
Yeah.
that's something that makes
Yeah.
me happy. So
I like
I'm
that.
sh I'm sure people get that from gardening and all sorts of other things. And I'm actually quite messy. So like the art is going to be amazing. And all the houses I've ever lived in, the first thing I've done is hung stuff up on the walls,
Yeah.
hung my stuff on the walls. So like I moved to Cork and I was renting for a year and a half with the kids, and we moved into a rented house and it had things on the walls. First thing I did before I even unpacked like a spoon or a fork was I took the stuff down and unbubble wrapped my stuff and hung it up. And
I
then it was
like it.
home.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
was home. And
Yeah.
it didn't matter that everything else was in boxes and we'd no clothes. It's like, now we're home,
Of
right?
course. And
Yeah.
I get it. Like, and my problem is, so I have, some film posters and stuff on the wall, and
Yeah, I can see them.
yeah, and my friend made them for me, and like my favorite film, like people are going to be so sick of me telling people, is 12 Angry Men, but it's up there, okay? So I think it should be here, even though I love Network is probably my second favorite film. So I want to swap them, but I
Yeah.
have OCD. So when I think of it, like in the sense of what's the big deal, right? So that's in my head. But
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about it, the big deal is like it's not how it should be or not how it's looked for ages. So
Yeah.
I'm very neat, as you would imagine, with someone with OCD. So everything is lined up along here and stuff like that. I'd love to do what you're doing because it sounds great. Like, how would that look there and that, but maybe I need to build up to it. It might just take a bit of a build up, I think, but I'll get there in the end,
I'll
but
tell you, the thing that might encourage you is the reward. The
mm,
reward of the thing being in a new place is that you see it in a way you didn't see it before. And it's not
yeah,
just that the light falls on it differently or whatever. It's that you walk into the room and the thing that's in front of you is, I mean, you might miss your old poster. You might be like, oh, I wish, but you know what? You can just move it back. It's
that's
okay.
true.
It doesn't
That
have
is
to
true.
stay the way you did it. You can move it and be like, I don't like that. I'm going back to the way it was. That's fine, right?
Yeah, and it's not like I'd need to do anything different with nails, or like you might have to do
Disney,
sometimes.
you don't have to get
Yeah,
the drill out. Like,
I don't have to do the drill thing, which is great. But look, honestly, Christine, that's the first time someone's said about reorganizing is something they love to do, and I'm here for it. I'll be honest, I'm here for it.
yeah.
Where can people find you, Christine? Where can they find the book?
Ooh, well, Negative Space is the name of the book, and
Yep.
it's available all over the place. I often send people to kennys.ie because they ship for free in Ireland and they ship worldwide. So if you want to buy it anywhere that isn't in Ireland, you can get it easily from Kenny's.ie, but you can get it from Eason's and Waterstones and all over the place, and the dreaded Amazon as well. It's available on ebook. You can get it on your Kindle. And if you have a local bookshop, if you go in and just ask them to order you a copy if they don't have it, that would be amazing. I love when people ask their local bookshop to order a copy.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it. And yeah, my writing about art appears in the Sunday Times. I'm doing a piece for the RTE website at the moment. So I do a lot of work for RTE as well. I've just written another book for the RHA, which is coming out in October.
Yeah,
So a bit of a delay on that one, but it's coming out in October. Possibly a slightly more art world book, but it's full of great stories. It's about the personalities that have shaped the Royal Hibernian Academy
oh,
over the
brilliant.
last 200 years. So it's driven by people more than art. So it's
Excellent.
interesting. There's politics and falling out and all sorts of things in it.
No, well, my favorite. But
Yeah.
honestly, I'm not just saying this because we are chatting, but people should definitely check out Negative Space. It's an excellent read.
Thank you.
Because of the fact we mentioned a number of times, it's about numerous different things that kind of come together, and I thought it was fascinating. And I thank you so much, Christine, for coming on, because it was a brilliant chat.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Oh, it's great to hear it. Listen, if you wouldn't mind, I say this to everyone. People are sick to hear me, but if you stick around for 1 minute, I'll close it out. I'll get a quick photo. Mad. The mad thing is this is coming out tomorrow. It's never that quick.
Ooh,
But yeah,
that's
but
tight.
I messed everything up. I'll be honest. My schedule was in a. My mum said it's the problem with calling it the weekly. You have to keep putting out once a week, and
Oh, you
yeah,
see,
I've put that
you kind
pressure.
of, yeah, you bound yourself into that one, didn't
I
you?
did a little bit, but look, I really enjoy chatting to people that I haven't spoken to before about interesting things. So there's a high reward for it, like. But
Yeah.
listen, I'll close this out, Christine, and we'll get a photo. I have to thank the usual people, John, for all the technical side of things that I'm unwilling to learn, and I say unwilling, I'm incapable of learning. It's probably a better way to put it. I always thank my mum, my dad, my granddad. Chat my granddad the other day on FaceTime. 96 years old and using FaceTime. I love it. During Calvin for the music and for the images, graphics, whatever you want to call them. YouTube, subscribe if you would. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Christine is also on Twitter. That's also worth
Oh,
pointing
yeah,
out.
you can
Yeah.
find me on Twitter and Instagram as well. And I joined TikTok, which I'm not a big TikToker, but I'm there.
Well, so yeah, I don't know what that is. I know what it is, but I like some people keep saying you should go on to TikTok, but I don't. What would I put on TikTok? Like, I don't know what to do.
I don't know. Like people say, oh, book talk is a big thing, so the writers should
Uh,
be on TikTok, because of book talk. But quite a big tweeter, and I like Instagram. It's friendlier, but
Instagram is anything's friendlier than Twitter, to be fair. Um,
true.
we're also on Spotify, Apple Anchor, Google Podcasts, all the other ones. Most importantly, thanks everyone for tuning in, wherever you are, YouTube, all the other ones. And once again, Christine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. See you next week. Bye.